Welcome back, AgriScience. We are going to start a new unit today, and today's unit is on global agriculture. So really, this is more than anything else. It's just kind of an introduction to agriculture in general, and it's going to talk about some of the things that we grow in North Carolina. It's going to talk about some inventions that have made agriculture easier over the years. It's going to basically help to define what agriculture is. If you are also taking AP Human Geography, um, some of this stuff will actually overlap with some of the stuff that you're taking in that class. So it may actually help you out just a little bit. So we're going to start with some definitions of agriculture and some words that you're going to hear throughout the course of the semester. The first one is agri-science, and of course, the title of the course is agri-science. But basically, whenever we are talking about agri-science, we're talking about um, principles in agriculture combined with different areas of science. And so when we talk about an applied science, it basically means that we are talking about a science where you actually are doing hands on type stuff. Instead of just talking about something that would be like biology. You're going to specifically get into different parts of biology. Like on here, it talks about entomologists, and entomologists are going to be people who help to control insects and study insects. And then people who are agronomists are going to use biology and they're going to use chemistry, but they're also going to be looking at crops and helping to control weeds in crops. So when we're looking at an applied science, we are basically looking at something that's a specific type of science, kind of like a specialist. It's kind of like if you went to, I mean, you can go to a doctor, but then you can also go to an optometrist to get your eyes checked, and you can also go to a podiatrist to get your feet looked at. So it's kind of like an agricultural science specialty whenever you're looking at these applied sciences. Agri-science is also going to use a scientific method to help solve problems. Anybody that thinks that agriculture is not um, technologically advanced is for sure missing the boat, because it is definitely a pretty advanced science. As far as defining the word agriculture, and we're going to have several slides that look at defining the word agriculture. Basically, what this slide is talking about is just an example of agriculture whenever we're looking specifically at cattle and everything that has to do with the raising, slaughter, marketing, sale of feeding of cattle. So anything that has to do with cattle, you're looking all the way from the people who are doing the breeding and reproduction of the animals, to the people who are providing feed, to the people who are working in the processing and slaughter facilities, to the people who are working in the grocery stores, to the people who are working in McDonald's and cooking the hamburgers. So we are looking at the fact that whenever you are looking at agriculture, you're not just looking at the cow itself, you are looking at every part of production, whether it be on the farm or whether it be the finished product, even all the way down to things like people who are using the leather to create shoes and belts. So anything that has to do with cattle is still agriculture related, regardless of whether it's on the farm or whether it is even in a restaurant. Another example is wheat. Whenever we look at a grain farmer, we're typically thinking about those people who are driving tractors throughout the Midwest and, Iowa and Indiana and Illinois and places like that where they have lots of crops. But whenever we're looking at wheat, we are not just specifically looking at the people who are planting the seed. We're looking all the way down to people who are the bakers, who are working at the bakeries and they're baking cupcakes. And so we're looking at all of those people, regardless of whether they are at the beginning of the processing line or the end of the processing line, even down to, and this even says related supplies and service, even down to GPS, because you're looking at people who are creating those GPS systems that are going in some of the more technologically advanced tractors, and those GPS systems are going to be what helps to guide those farmers as they're going through the field. So lots of jobs that are involved in agriculture It may not necessarily just be on the farm, but they are all throughout the process. And we've got roses here. And whenever we're looking at roses, we're looking at the floriculture industry, part of the horticulture industry, and you might be looking at all the way from people who are growing the roses in the greenhouse to the people in the florist who are designing them to the people who are creating the fertilizer that's going to make sure that they stay healthy to the people who are building greenhouses. All of those people go into creating those roses that eventually the customer is going to purchase. So, lots of different jobs involved in agriculture, and not just the people who are on the farm. The last term that we're going to Nope, the second to the last term that we're going to define is agribusiness. And agribusiness just refers to those businesses that have something to do with agriculture. Um, John Deere, John Deere is going to be a company that's going to create agricultural equipment. And so, that is an agribusiness. Tractor Supply Company is an agribusiness. Anything that has to do with agriculture that has been created into a business is going to be an agribusiness. So, lots of different businesses there. So now the final term is renewable natural resources, and we're actually going to talk more about renewable natural resources whenever we get into environmental science. And so environmental science will be the unit that we are doing after global agriculture, because with environmental science we want to go ahead and be able to get to forestry before the leaves start to fall off the trees. So, the definition of renewable natural resources, you're looking at things that can replace themselves. Now, obviously, we're not looking at cloning, but we're talking about animals that can reproduce themselves and plants that can reproduce themselves, from the sexual reproduction of flowers and trees, and then the reproduction of animals. So, anything that can reproduce itself is a renewable natural resource. So, this is where I like to start talking about your interest in why you took agri-science. And obviously, I can't talk to you right now because I'm talking to a computer. But a lot of times, whenever we're discussing this part, I talk to students about the fact that, 100 years ago, when you thought about agriculture in the United States, 98% of the people who were involved in, or who were in the United States, were involved in agriculture in some way, whether it be small family farms or gardening or even canning, raising animals. We're looking at the fact that these days most people don't do that kind of stuff. Most people are getting their groceries from the grocery store, and they may or may not even know where it came from before it got to the grocery store. So a lot of times I'll have students who will, I'll ask the question, how many of you plan to farm? And that's why you took this course. And typically I may have a hand or two that gets raised. But then I ask the question, okay, so how many of you took this course because you are involved in some area of agriculture, or you're interested in some area of agriculture, or you want to have a garden, or you want to have pets? And then hands start going up all over the place. So there are a lot of people that are involved in agriculture but aren't necessarily on the farm. Right now, this says that 2% of America's workforce helps to meet the food and fiber needs of our nation, and it's actually less than 2%. It's more like 1.7, 1.8%. So, when you're looking at that small number of people who are actually doing all the production in the United States, it's kind of scary to think that we don't have more people that are involved in agriculture, and that we're not more of a sustainable society. So that's why I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're interested in agriculture and agri-science, because you will have an opportunity to know a little bit more about agriculture, where your food comes from, and potentially even help to become more sustainable, so that you can figure out ways that you can support yourself and your family in the future. So let's look at some inventions. We're going to spend some time talking about some of the things that have made agriculture easier, that have made it more mechanized and help people in the long run, made it a time saver and an energy saver. And I'm sure that you have heard of the cotton gin before. And basically, the purpose behind the cotton gin is actually to help to remove the seed from inside that cotton fiber. So if you were to get a cotton plant and you were to actually take a cotton boll and you were to feel that cotton boll, you would feel hard seeds inside of it. It's kind of like the fruit of the plant almost, and the seeds are in the middle of it. And if you can imagine taking a regular cotton ball that you've gotten from the store and trying to get something sticky out of the middle of the cotton ball, it's kind of difficult to be able to do that. And that's what the cotton gin actually does. Now, there is a little bit of controversy, conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, about the cotton gin, because Eli Whitney is supposedly the inventor of the cotton gin. But Eli Whitney was actually a farm manager for this lady named Catherine Green, and her husband was Nathaniel Green, and he was this big Revolutionary War general. And so Catherine actually was the one that was home most of the time when her husband was out doing other stuff. And so she was kind of on the farm, but because she was a woman, people wouldn't actually believe that a woman could invent something such as this. So a lot of people say that Catherine Green actually invented the cotton gin, but that Eli Whitney was credited with it because he was the man of the farm at that particular time. So, a little bit of a conspiracy theory there. Not really sure if that's what's actually happened, but that's a story that we hear about sometimes. This picture here just shows you what that original cotton gin looked like. And it talks about the fact that you can see the A and the B and the C and how all of it goes through there. But basically, this machine just helped to pull the actual cotton itself, the fibers, away from those seeds. So, you know, interesting product, interesting invention, and it helped to make working in cotton much, much easier. Big product in the South. Okay. If you were to think about peanuts, typically whenever we think about peanuts in the South, we think about George Washington Carver. He did a lot of things with peanuts. He did a lot of research on peanuts. We had a lot of peanut growth in the southern part of the United States, and so he figured out that peanuts were what we call a legume, and so is soybeans. And so both of those plants don't have to have nitrogen fertilizer. When we think about fertilizers, you basically are thinking about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium being added to the plants to make them grow better. And the nitrogen makes them green. Um, Peanuts and soybeans actually can pull nitrogen from the air. So they're not actually making their own nitrogen, but they are able to pull the nitrogen from the air that's around them. And they don't have to have that particular type of fertilizer. So George Washington Carver figured out that you could do crop rotations and basically plant one thing this year and plant something else there next year. And it wouldn't deplete the soil. It wouldn't wear the soil out and reduce the nutrients that are there. So he figured out ways that we could do a lot to help the soil fertility, especially in the southern part of the United States where we were doing a whole bunch of different crops at the time. When you think about things like wheat and oats and crops like that, at one point there were people who were actually having to go out and cut the grain with a scythe or a sickle. And I'm going to go to the next slide real quick and show you that. This person right here is actually cutting the grain. It's a very grain, well, it's a grainy picture. But they're actually cutting the grain with this hook. And it took a long time to do that because you're going through and you're swinging and you're chopping down these basically tall grasses. And one person could do anywhere from a half to an acre in an entire day. But Cyrus McCormick, this guy, here, if we go back, invented the grain reaper, and that helped people to be able to get these crops in a little bit faster. Um, and I'll show you a couple of pictures here. After it was cut, it was bound by hand, and this is the original picture of the reaper here. It would have actually been pulled behind mules or an ox or team of horses. There's a picture of one with the horses on it, and this guy's just riding along through the field, and it's cutting the grain as it goes, and you can see that the grain is actually being collected on this side, and they would come back and they would collect it and gather it up by hand and bind it by hand. There's another picture there of the actual McCormick Reaper itself. So you can see this one looks like mules that it's being pulled by. The next invention that we're going to take a look at is the cast iron plow. And I know you've heard of Thomas Jefferson, but Thomas Jefferson was, really big inventor. He invented a lot of different things, and one of the things that he invented was this cast iron plow, and the purpose was to be able to um, break the soil. So that you could get it prepared for planting or whatever you needed it for. Now, the problem with this is if you know somebody who cooks with a cast iron skillet, those things are super, super heavy. So, can you imagine having this cast iron plow that's being dug through the ground? Now, if you're in the eastern part of the state where it's sandy, that's not so bad. But if you're in our part of the state where there's a ton of clay, just imagine the weight of those heavy, heavy skillets being multiplied in size to be the size of a plow and then having to guide it through the sticky clay. So, great invention, but it just needed a little bit of tweaking to get it better. And we're going to see how it got made better in just a couple of slides. So, here's a picture of an early plow. And we actually took this picture um, in Iowa. Mr. Harris and I got to go to a swine educators conference in Iowa many years ago, and they had a demonstration farm right there in the middle of Des Moines, and they grew small crops based on what things were like at a particular time in history. So it was a historical farm, and this is one of the first examples of a plow. And this one is a little bit later on that has an actual ride-on plow there, so you can see the seat on that one, and then the plow blade behind it. So I told you, we're looking at a heavy invention that was hard to keep up in the sticky soil. So there was this guy, and you may have heard of him, and he actually created a new plow that was lighter weight. It was easier to get through the soil, and it was made of a different material than the cast iron, so it didn't really stick as bad. And that guy is John Deere. So a lot of people think that John Deere is the person who actually created the tractor, but his claim to fame and his very first invention in agriculture was actually this steel plow that was lighter weight, and because of the slick shininess of the steel, the soil was able to kind of just run off of the plow instead of sticking to it like it did with the cast iron plow. So had a smoother surface, and was able to go through the soil much better and was much lighter weight. So John Deere's actual claim to fame was not necessarily the tractor. I know it is now, but it wasn't all those years ago. His first invention was actually the steel moldboard plow. Couple of planters were created by this inventor named Henry Blair, and I'm not sure why we don't have a picture of him there, but we don't. But he invented the seed planter and the cotton planter, and both of these made life a whole lot easier as far as planting seeds. There's a corn picker. Now, this particular type of corn picker that was created by Edmund Quincy, and I'll show you a picture of it in just a few minutes, or a picture of a modern day one. This corn picker was not like a combine type corn picker. This is corn pickers where you're actually picking it by the ear. So when you're looking at actually picking the entire ear itself and not what you're doing with a combine. So the original corn picker was created by Edmund Quincy. This is a drawing of it. This would have been a like an advertisement that you would have seen in some sort of an agricultural catalog. Uh, there was a lot of those in those days because we obviously didn't have TV and internet. So to actually have a color advertisement was a pretty big deal. Um, this is a picture of a modern corn picker. So it kind of looks like a combine. It kind of looks like the combines that you see that are picking grain type corn in the field. But if you notice and you look up here where I'm circling the arrow, you can see the actual ears of corn being shot off into that truck there. So with this corn picker, we're looking at picking the entire ear. So this would be like sweet corn, or maybe even corn that you're getting like deer corn or something like that. So when you're picking the entire ear versus a combine, which is actually going to take the corn off the cob itself and is actually just going to pick the grain. Oh, this is a fun one. Can't tell you how many times I have gotten scraped up on this or torn clothes on this barbed wire. Um, it's kind of one of those things where it's a necessary evil. Barbed wire is a pain for human beings because it's hard to install without getting stuck with it. And it's hard to, when you're working around it, not to get caught up in barbed wire. But it's great for livestock and keeping livestock where they're supposed to be and keeping other livestock out of where your livestock's supposed to be. So it really has changed the way that we do livestock because it's good for keeping your animals in the pasture and good for keeping predators out of the pasture. So, my all-time favorite there, and the cause of many injuries in my lifetime, barbed wire. This one, you get to use this one a lot of times if you are on campus. If you're one of our on-campus students, you've had an opportunity to work with a milking machine. You've had an opportunity to milk by hand, and as you can probably imagine, when you have to milk a lot by hand, get these forearms of steel. But if you don't want forearms of steel and you don't have a whole day to do all your milking, using a milking machine makes it much, much easier. And you can see that this original milking machine, now this actually was created by a woman and she actually got credit for it. Her name was Anna Baldwin, and it uses vacuum suction to actually pull the milk out of the udder of the goat or the cow. These were originally invented for cows. And you can see this one was using something that kind of looks like a bicycle pump. And so it helps to basically pull the milk out of the animal and into a separate holding tank. And that's essentially what we have today that we use. This is what the modern milking machine looks like. This is a cattle milking machine. It's going to have 4 cups instead of the 2 that we have for our goats because the cows are going to have 4 teats versus the 2 that our goats have. And you can see essentially how it works is it just literally pulls that milk out of the animal. And obviously, if you're on campus, you've had a chance to see this work. And if you're off campus, then at some point I'm going to try to take some videos of things that we're doing around campus so that you can actually have a virtual field trip and keep up with what we're working on. Okay, a few more things. So at one point, it was really hard to keep healthy foods healthy, if that makes any sense. Refrigeration was not a thing until this guy helped to create refrigeration. Thomas Elkins designed a device that was like our first type of refrigerator. And that really helped with the preservation of foods and it helped us to be able to keep foods fresh longer. Even now, a lot of our crops have been modified in a way that they have a longer shelf life. And so this was just the first of many inventions to help preserve food so that it lasts longer, so that the consumer is not having to go out and purchase food as often. All right. Next invention. Now there's a little bit of I don't want to say controversy. It's not controversy, but some people will kind of, you know, say, well, I don't know that Benjamin Holt's actually the first guy who invented the tractor. So there are several different people who actually have been credited with inventing the tractor. But this guy, Benjamin Holt, he actually um, helped to figure out a way to replace the mule with a tractor, with some source of power other than an animal. And so he actually invented the term horsepower. It helped to invent one of the very first tractors. And his company eventually became Caterpillar. And so if you think about the Caterpillar company now, go all the way back to its origins, that would be something that kind of looks like this. And you can see that even back then it had tracks the way that you see a lot of equipment having now. But this is kind of one of the first ancestors of the modern day tractor. All right, so let's fast forward a lot. Um, we kind of went from a time whenever there was a lot of stuff going on in the Industrial Revolution and a lot of things were being invented to now we're looking at a lot of things that are more technologically advanced. So we're skipping all the way up to the late 1980s. And this guy, John Sanford, actually created what we call a gene gun. And it literally looks like a gun. And basically, what this does is it actually shoots cells into the plants. Now, we can't use a gene gun with animals because we obviously don't want to shoot an animal full of something. Typically, whenever we're doing gene manipulation with animals, it has to do on like a cellular level, and we're looking at um, artificial insemination and things like that. But with plants, it's not necessarily a deal breaker if you shoot the plant. It's not necessarily going to kill the entire plant. So this gene gun helps to inject cells with genetic information into a plant so that you can change the plant to use it for a different purpose other than what you had originally been using it for. Couple more. GPS technology, where would we be without this today? This was originally created in 1993. However, today GPS is everywhere, and you can see all these different satellites that shows around the Earth. These GPS satellites are bouncing signals off of each other, and it can basically tell you exactly where you are within a few inches. And so GPS is kind of it has kind of taken over our lives. Most of us have some sort of GPS in our vehicle. Our phones have GPS, and they tell us exactly where we are. Well, with tractors, you can install GPS on tractors, and you literally can have a tractor that pretty much runs itself. There is a robotic tractor that's been made by Case that actually does not have to have a person on it. And I know that's a little weird, but it actually can run by itself just with GPS technology. And so this GPS can tell us areas of our fields that need more rain or areas of our fields that need more nutrients. So it's amazing what this GPS can pinpoint and how technologically advanced our agriculture society has become because of this GPS technology. Last one, and I will actually add the video of this one to your page because this one's actually pretty cool to watch. It's a robotic milking machine. And this particular one, we will never be able to afford something like this on Crest High School's farm. However, it's pretty dang cool because this cow can literally go in and get milked when she wants to. If you look at this top picture right here, you can actually see the lasers. The lasers help to determine when there is a cow in that machine, and it actually puts those teat cups on her and milks her. and it releases food so that she can eat while she's being milked. And when it's done, it just opens right up and she can go back out. Now, it also determines which animal is in there. So she basically has a chip or a barcode that is scanned, and it lets them know which animal is in the machine. And if she's already been milked one time and she's just trying to come back through for a free snack, it will not let her be milked. So this is pretty cool. I don't know that it's ever going to get widespread use because it can only milk one cow at the time. But make sure that you check out the video on this one because it's pretty interesting to watch. So that's a lot of inventions, and I'm going to stop there because by now you have got invention overload. And next time we will take a look at some land grant institutions and some other agriculture related agencies. I promise that video will not be as long. But just in case you've got questions about any of the agriculture inventions, make sure that you email me if there's something you're not sure about. And maybe one day one of you will be this big ag inventor, and I will be teaching about your inventions online. Until next time, see you guys. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.